Greek mythology is a collection of myths originally told by the ancient Greeks and is a form of Greek folklore. Today, along with Roman mythology, it falls under the broader category known as classical mythology. These stories deal with the origins and nature of the world, the lives of gods and heroes, and the religious rituals of the ancient Greeks. Modern scholars study these myths to better understand ancient Greek religious and political institutions and the nature of myth-making. Greek myths were most likely spread orally by Minos and Mycenaean singers from the 18th century BCE. The stories of the heroes of the Trojan War became part of the oral tradition through Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Homer's contemporary Hesiod, in his poems Theogony and Works and Days, narrates the formation of the world, the succession of divine rulers, the ages of humanity, the origins of human suffering, and the beginnings of sacrificial practices. Myths are also preserved in Homeric hymns, fragments of epic cycles, lyric poetry, 5th century BCE tragedies and comedies, writings of Hellenistic scholars and poets, and texts from the Roman period by authors like Plutarch and Pausanias. In addition to literary sources, myths were vividly represented in ancient Greek art. Gods, heroes, and mythological events appear on vases, votive offerings, and other decorative objects. Geometric designs on 8th century BCE pottery depict scenes from the epic cycle as well as the adventures of Heracles. In the following archaic, classical, and Hellenistic periods, mythological scenes complement the literary evidence from Homer and other sources. Greek mythology has had a profound influence on Western civilization, shaping its culture, arts, and literature, and continues to be a part of Western heritage. From antiquity to the present, poets and artists have drawn inspiration from Greek myths, discovering their contemporary relevance and significance. Origin myths, or creation myths, represent attempts to explain the beginning of the universe in human language. The most widely accepted version at the time, although philosophical in nature, is recounted by Hesiod in his Theogony. He begins with chaos, a primordial void. Next come Gaia, earth, the eternal solid foundation of all things, Tartarus, located in the depths of the broad-pathed earth, and Eros, love, the most beautiful among immortal gods. Without male assistance, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, sky, who then fertilized her. From this union, the Titans were born, 6 males, Ceus, Crius, Cronus, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Oceanus, and 6 females, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, Rhea, Thea, Themis, and Tethys. After Cronus was born, Gaia and Uranus decided that no more Titans should be born. Following them were the one-eyed Cyclopes and the Centimanes, or hundred-handers, cast into Tartarus by Uranus. This enraged Gaia, and she convinced Cronus, the youngest, craftiest, and most terrible of Gaia's children, to castrate his father. Cronus did so, becoming the ruler of the Titans with his sister wife Rhea, while the other Titans became his court. The father-son conflict motif recurred when Cronus faced his own son, Zeus. Fearing that his offspring would betray him as he had betrayed his father, Cronus swallowed each of Rhea's children at birth. Rhea, distraught, hid Zeus and tricked Cronus by giving him a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead. When Zeus grew up, he gave Cronus a drugged drink, causing him to vomit. From Cronus's stomach emerged Zeus's siblings, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, as well as the stone Rhea had hidden. Zeus then challenged Cronus to a war for dominion over the gods. With the help of the Cyclopes, whom he freed from Tartarus, Zeus and his siblings were victorious, and Cronus and the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus. Zeus, too, faced similar concerns. After a prophecy predicted that a child born from his first wife, Metis, would surpass him, Zeus swallowed her. However, Metis was already pregnant with Athena, who sprang fully grown and battle-ready from Zeus's head. The earliest Greek poetic thought considered theogonies as a prototypical poetic form, prototypical mythos, and attributed them with almost magical power. The archetypal poet Orpheus was also considered the original singer of theogonies, used in Apollonius' Argonautica to calm the seas and storms or to move the hearts of the underworld gods during his descent to Hades. In Homer's hymn to Hermes, When Hermes invents the lyre, his first act is to sing of the birth of the gods. Hesiod's Theogony is not only the most comprehensive surviving account of the gods, but also the most complete surviving description of the archaic poet's function, preceded by an invocation to the Muses. Theogony was also the subject of many lost poems used in special ritual purifications and mystery rites, attributed to Orpheus, Musaeus, Epimenides, Abaris, and other legendary seers. There is evidence that Plato was familiar with a version of the Orphic Theogony. Religious rites and beliefs, however, were generally expected to remain unspoken, and the public often knew very little once the beliefs lost their ritual function. Nevertheless, references to more public aspects of these myths were frequent. In pottery and religious art, many images interpreted, and often misinterpreted, from various myths and stories have survived. Some fragments of these works are preserved in quotations by Neoplatonist philosophers and in recently discovered papyrus fragments. One such fragment, the Derveni Papyrus, proves that an Orphic theogonic cosmogonic poem existed at least by the 5th century BCE. The earliest philosophical cosmologists opposed, or sometimes built upon, the popular mythological concepts that had long existed in the Greek world. Some of these concepts can be traced to the poetry of Homer and Hesiod. In Homer, the earth is seen as a flat disk floating on the river Oceanus, overseen by a hemispherical sky, filled with the sun, moon, and stars. The sun, Helios, travels across the sky like a charioteer and circles the earth in a golden bowl at night. The sun, earth, sky, rivers, and winds could be invoked in prayers and were asked to witness oaths. Natural chasms were widely believed to be entrances to Hades and the subterranean home of ancestors. Influences from other cultures continually introduced new themes into this cosmological vision. According to classical mythology, after the overthrow of the Titans, a new pantheon of gods and goddesses was established. Among the principal Greek gods were the Olympians, who resided on Mount Olympus under the supervision of Zeus. Limiting their number to 12 appears to be a relatively modern idea. In addition to the Olympians, the Greeks worshipped various rural deities, the satyr god Pan, nymphs, river spirits, naiads, those living in springs, dryads, tree spirits, nereids, sea nymphs, river gods, satyrs, and others. There were also dark forces of the underworld, such as the Erinyes, or Furies, said to pursue those guilty of crimes against blood relatives. To honor the ancient Greek pantheon, poets composed the Homeric hymns, a collection of 33 songs. Gregory Nagy, 1992, describes the larger Homeric hymns as simple preludes invoking a single god, in contrast to the Theogony. In Greek mythology, the gods are described as essentially corporeal, possessing idealized bodies. According to Walter Burkert, a defining feature of Greek anthropomorphism is that Greek gods are persons, not abstractions, ideas, or concepts. Regardless of their basic forms, the ancient Greek gods possessed many fantastical abilities. Most importantly, they were immune to disease and could only be injured under extraordinarily rare circumstances. The Greeks considered immortality the defining characteristic of their gods, ensured by the continual consumption of nectar and ambrosia, which replenished the divine blood in their veins. Each god descended from a family line, pursued particular interests, specialized in specific domains, and was governed by a unique personality. These definitions, however, stemmed from numerous archaic local variants that did not always overlap. When invoked in poetry, prayer, or cult, the gods were addressed by a combination of their names and epithets, which distinguished them from other manifestations. For example, Apollo Musagetes, Apollo, leader of the Muses. Alternatively, an epithet could identify a god's specific local aspect, which sometimes already existed in classical Greece as an ancient feature. Most gods were associated with particular aspects of life. For instance, Aphrodite was the goddess of love and beauty, Ares the god of war, Hades the ruler of the underworld, and Athena the goddess of wisdom and courage. Some gods, like Apollo and Dionysus, displayed complex personalities and blended functions, while others, such as Hestia, literally hearth, and Helios, literally sun, were closer to personifications. The most impressive temples tended to be dedicated to a limited number of gods who were the focus of major Pan-Hellenic cults. Nevertheless, smaller deities often had local cults in individual regions and villages. Many cities also honored well-known gods with unusual local rituals and associated them with myths unknown elsewhere. In the heroic age, the cults of heroes, or demigods, complemented the worship of the gods. The age of gods and mortals, this transitional period bridged the time when gods lived alone and the era when their interference in human affairs was limited. During these early days, groups mingled more freely than in later periods. Many of these stories were later recounted in Ovid's Metamorphoses and are generally divided into two thematic groups: love stories and punishment stories. Love stories often involve incest or a mortal woman seduced or raped by a male god, resulting in the birth of heroic children. These tales typically suggest that relationships between gods and mortals were to be avoided. Even consensual relationships rarely ended happily. In some cases, a female deity mates with a mortal man, as in Homer's hymn to Aphrodite, where the goddess lies with Anchises to bear Aeneas. The second type, punishment stories, involves the acquisition or invention of culturally significant achievements. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, Tantalus stealing nectar and ambrosia from Zeus' table and giving them to his people, revealing the secrets of the gods. Prometheus or Lycaon inventing sacrifices, Demeter teaching Triptolemus agriculture and the mysteries, or Marsyas inventing the aulos and challenging Apollo to a musical contest. Ian Morris considers Prometheus' adventures a place between the history of the gods and the history of man. A 3rd century BCE anonymous papyrus vividly depicts Dionysus punishing the Thracian king Lycurgus. Lycurgus' delayed recognition of the new god leads to horrific penalties extending into the afterlife. The story of Dionysus' arrival to establish his cult in Thrace was also the subject of a trilogy by Aeschylus. In another tragedy, Euripides' Bacchae depicts Pentheus, king of Thebes, punished by Dionysus for disrespecting the god and spying on his female followers, the Maenads. An image from a red figure Hydria of Demeter and Metaneira, circa 340 BCE, Apulia, Altes Museum, Berlin, illustrates a tale based on an old folk motif. In a similar story, Demeter, disguised as an elderly woman named Doso, searched for her daughter Persephone and received a hospitable welcome from King Celeus of Eleusis in Attica. To reward his hospitality, Demeter intended to make his son Demophon a god, but the ritual was interrupted when his mother Metaneira entered and screamed in fear upon seeing her son in the fire, angering Demeter and leading her to lament the inability of foolish mortals to understand ritual. The Age of Heroes, the Age of the Heroes, is known as the Heroic Age. Epic and genealogical poems formed story cycles clustered around particular heroes or events, establishing family connections between characters of different stories and thereby organizing the tales sequentially. According to Ken Dowden, 1992, there is even an epic effect. We can trace the fate of certain families over successive generations. Following the rise of hero cults, gods and heroes formed a sacred landscape and were invoked together in oaths and prayers. Burkert, 2002, notes, unlike the gods, the hero list is never fixed and final. The great gods no longer are born, but new heroes may always emerge from the army of the dead. Another key difference between hero and god cults is that the hero becomes central to local group identity. The monumental labors of Heracles are considered the beginning of the heroic age. 3 major events are also attributed to the heroic age: the Argonaut expedition, the Theban cycle, and the Trojan War. Heracles and the Heraclidae. For further information, Heracles, Heraclidae, and Hercules. Some scholars suggest that behind the complex mythology of Heracles there was likely a real man, perhaps a chief vassal of the kingdom of Argos. Other scholars propose that Heracles' story is an allegory for the sun's annual passage through the 12 zodiac constellations. Still others point to older myths from different cultures, indicating that Heracles' narrative was a local adaptation of already well-known heroic myths. Traditionally, Heracles was the son of Zeus and Alcmene, the granddaughter of Perseus. His fantastical solitary adventures, full of folktale motifs, provided abundant material for popular legend. According to Burkhardt, 2002, he is depicted as a sacrificer, remembered as a founder of altars, and imagined as a voracious eater. He appears in this role in comedy. While his tragic end supplied rich material for tragedy, Talia Papadopoulou considers Heracles a play of great importance for the study of other Euripides dramas. In art and literature, Heracles is depicted as a medium-height, extremely strong man. His characteristic weapon is the bow, though he often uses a club as well. Vase paintings demonstrate Heracles' unparalleled popularity, with his battles against the lion depicted hundreds of times. Heracles also entered Etruscan and Roman mythology and cult, and the exclamation Mehercule became as familiar to the Greeks as Heracles. In Italy, he was worshipped as the god of merchants and craftsmen, though others prayed to him for characteristic gifts such as good fortune or deliverance from danger. Heracles achieved the highest social prestige by being designated the official ancestor of the Dorian kings. This likely legitimized the Dorians' migration to the Peloponnesus. Hylas, one of Heracles' sons and a hero of a Doric lineage, was among the Heraclidae, numerous descendants of Heracles, particularly those of Hylas. Other Heraclidae included Macaria, Lamos, Manto, Biener, Lipolemus, and Telephus. These Heraclidae, according to legend, claimed the right to rule the kingdoms of Mycenae, Sparta, and Argos in the Peloponnesus through their ancestor. Their rise to power is often called the Dorian invasion. Kings of Lydia and later Macedonia also became Heraclidae, ruling with similar prestige. Bellerophon riding Pegasus to slay the Chimera, central medallion of a Roman mosaic from Autun, Musée Roland, 2nd to 3rd century CE. Other members of this first generation of heroes, Perseus, Deucalion, Theseus, and Bellerophon, share many traits with Heracles. Like him, their heroism is solitary, fantastical, and close to fairy tale in nature. They slay monsters such as the Chimera and Medusa. Bellerophon's adventures are of the same ordinary heroic type as those of Heracles and Theseus. Sending a hero to an assumed death is a recurring theme in this early heroic tradition, applied in cases such as Perseus and Bellerophon. The Argonauts for further information. Argonauts, the only Hellenistic epic that survives to the present, is Apollonius of Rhodes Argonautica, which recounts the legendary journey of Jason and the Argonauts to retrieve the Golden Fleece from the land of Colchis. In the Argonautica, Jason is sent on this quest by King Peleus, who has received a prophecy that a man wearing a single sandal will be his enemy. Jason loses his sandal in a river before arriving at Peleus' palace, and the epic thus begins. Almost every member of the next generation of heroes, including Heracles, sailed with Jason on the Argo to retrieve the Golden Fleece. The Trojan War and aftermath. For further information, Trojan War, an epic cycle. Enrique Simonet's 1904 painting The Judgment of Paris depicts Paris holding the golden apple in his right hand, judging the goddesses. In Giovanni Battista Tiepolo's The Rage of Achilles, 1757, fresco, 300 by 300 centimeters, Villa Valmarana, Vicenza, Achilles draws his sword to kill Agamemnon in anger at the threat to take Briseis, Agamemnon's war prize. The goddess Athena suddenly appears, grabbing Achilles by the hair and preventing the violent act. Greek mythology reaches its peak with the Trojan War fought between Greece and Troy and the events that followed. In works such as Homer's Iliad, the main stories were already shaped and absorbed, while individual themes were later explored in detail, especially in Greek drama. The Trojan War also captured Roman interest through the story of the Trojan hero Aeneas, whose journey from Troy led to the founding of a city that would one day become Rome, recounted in Virgil's Aeneid. Book 2 contains the most famous account of Troy's fall. Finally, there exist two Latin pseudo-histories under the names Dictes Cretensis and Dares Phrygius. The epic poems of the Trojan War cycle begin with the events leading to the conflict: the golden apple of Eris and Callisti, the judgment of Paris, Helen's abduction, and Iphigenia's sacrifice at Aulis. To recover Helen, the Greeks launched a massive expedition under the command of Agamemnon, king of Argos or Mycenae and brother of Menelaus, but the Trojans refused to return her. The Iliad, set in the 10th year of the war, narrates the conflict between Agamemnon and Greece's greatest warrior, Achilles, resulting in the deaths of Achilles' beloved companion Patroclus and Priam's eldest son Hector. After Hector's death, the Trojans received two exotic allies, Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, and Memnon, king of Ethiopia and son of Eos, the dawn goddess. Achilles killed both, but Paris later succeeded in killing Achilles with an arrow to his heel, the only vulnerable part of his otherwise invincible body. Before capturing Troy, the Greeks had to steal the Palladium, a wooden statue of Pallas Athena, from the citadel. Ultimately, with Athena's help, they built the Trojan horse. Despite Cassandra's warnings, the Trojans were convinced by Sinon, a Greek pretending to defect, to bring the horse inside the city walls as an offering to Athena. The priest Laocoon, who demanded the horse's destruction, was killed by sea serpents. That night, the Greek fleet returned, and soldiers hidden in the horse opened Troy's gates. In the ensuing massacre, Priam and his remaining sons were killed, and Trojan women were sent into slavery across Greek cities. The adventurous homecomings of Greek leaders, including the journeys of Odysseus and Aeneas, Aeneid, and Agamemnon's murder, are recounted in two epics, the Nostoi, Lost Returns, and Homer's Odyssey. The Trojan cycle also follows the adventures of the Trojan descendants, such as Orestes and Telemachus. The Trojan War provided a range of themes and served as a primary source of inspiration for ancient Greek artists, for example, the metopes depicting the sack of Troy on the Parthenon. This artistic preference for themes derived from the Trojan cycle demonstrates its significance for ancient Greek civilization. The same mythological cycle later inspired numerous works of European literature. For instance, medieval European writers, who had no direct knowledge of Homer, found in the Trojan legend a rich source of heroic and romantic storytelling, providing a framework to insert their own ideals of courtly and knightly conduct. 12th-century authors such as Benoit de Saint-Maur, Roman de Troyes, 1154-60, and Joseph of Exeter, de Bello Troiano, 1183, rewrote the war, following the standard version found in Dictys and Dares, thereby adhering to Horace's advice and Virgil's example. Rather than creating something entirely new, they reinterpreted the Trojan epic. Some of the more famous heroes recognized for their roles in the Trojan War include Trojan side, Aeneas Hector Paris Greek side, Ajax, two individuals named Ajax, Achilles King Agamemnon Menelaus Odysseus Diomedes.